All right. Welcome to another episode of The Close-Up. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, and today we have a fun episode. We got Mason Williams of Sports Illustrated, Orlando Magic beat writer, joining us, and we get into it. We talk a lot of Magic basketball. We talk for a little over an hour. It's a good conversation. We get deep about the Jalen Suggs injury. We get deep about what is going on with this Magic basketball team. They're in a funk. It's been weird. We talk about it a lot. We have some fun. We talk about little Jett Howard. He's been in the rotation now, getting minutes over Gary Harris for a couple of games in a row. And that's been a lot of fun, despite the losses, but he's not the reason why we're losing. And then we also talk about Wendell Carter Jr. He's been pretty solid for a while now. And we didn't think that Magic fans or just in general have given him enough positive love. And he has been really solid recently. So we get deep into that. It's a very good conversation. We go deep on four main topics, and Mason's just awesome. You know, he's in the media room. He's at practices. He is around this team all the time. So he is very in tune, very tapped in with what's going on. And he brings a really good perspective. So make sure you check out Mason. His information is down below in the description. And also, obviously, you'll hear him talk in the podcast show today. Before we get to that, I just want to remind you all, like and subscribe to the channel. We're doing a lot of good things here. You know, we're trying to give you all some good coverage. We could use your support back by liking and subscribing. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Second, BetOnline is the world's most trusting betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every 3-point to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Gamble responsibly. Magic fans, listen up. Orlando Magic Radio Network pregame and postgame host Brandon Kravitz is live daily on 96.9 The Game within the zone starting at 3:30 p.m. And on Magic Game Days, he stretches that show all the way to 6:30 with the final 30 minutes being completely Magic focused. Want even more bonus content? Check out his Zone Heads podcast for weekly on-demand shows. He is awesome. We love Brandon Kravitz. He's a great partner for us. He does a lot of things with us behind the scenes. But yeah, check out his stuff. I know I just did the official ad read, but my personal opinion is he's awesome. So please check him out. And check out our Patreon program. I'm not going to ramble on too much longer. I really want you guys to listen to the show. Enjoy the conversation with Mason Williams of Sports Illustrated, Orlando Magic beat writer. What's going on, Magic fans? Like I said in the intro, we got Mason Williams of Sports Illustrated, Orlando Magic beat writer with us. Mason, what's going on, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. A little tired. We're recording this kind of late on a Monday night, but overall, you know, it's not a game day. Game day is tomorrow. So it's a possibility for a good return for the Orlando Magic to have a comeback and show a good response versus a Toronto Raptors team, which, you know, they pushed the Magic and won last night. But overall, I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk some Magic basketball for you, or not for you, with you. And and have a good conversation. Mason, first off, yeah, again, thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, man. I always appreciate the chance too.
Dude, we have a great time. You're one of my favorite guests. We just talk ball, and it's like I don't have to do a crazy deep outline. I'll put a couple bullet points, and you and I, we've built this flow. It's great. It's great.
We have.
Yeah, it's like your, I think, third or fourth time coming on the show too. So this is
something like
been
that.
Like a reoccurring guest throughout the season, which has been lovely. Let's get into it, man. So there's a lot of things that have been going on with the Magic, right? Some interesting things, which we'll get to in a little bit. Some sad things, and then just, you know, typical like Magic Twitter just kind of being crazy, and the Magic on a losing streak, you know, 3 games and a couple close games, and games they should have won and games they could have won, and games not surprised they lost versus the Cavs. But let's dial all that back and let's just talk about like the big news right now with Jalen Suggs, right? He's missed a good amount of time. between his back injury and now his leg injury. He came back for one game. I think he missed like 10 games on his first injury with the back, came back, got hurt in his return game with the leg injury, had a quad contusion, which was very interesting because they initially he was out for like a game or two, and then he was quickly like questionable and day to day and constantly like, we'll see how he feels. And it gets downgraded into out, day of. It was just like kind of weird how they would list him on when it was clearly after a few weeks, we're like, it doesn't feel right. And this is, they're speaking about it weird. There was a day like 2 or 3 weeks ago, you and Jason Beatty and Philip, you had like Coach Mosley for like a solid almost 2 minutes, and you had some really good conversation with him where we got some more clarity. Then like a week later, we find out he's got a word I can't pronounce going on in his knee, and he's going to need a surgery to trim off some cartilage. So I'm just going to back off and just ask you, what is going on with Jalen Suggs?
Jalen, I believe and this isn't confirmed yet, but I believe I saw Jett post on his Instagram story that Jalen had his surgery this evening, or he was going in for a surgery this evening. So Jalen just had, I always struggle to pronounce this word, arthroscopic surgery on his left knee. The issue was trochlea cartilage, which
Trochlea, that's how you say it. Thank you.
I think that's how you say it. A lot of words here to try and pronounce first, but I think that the trochlea, when it first came out, I got to be honest, that was something I had to Google. I did a little quick research on it. From what I've, found out, and I'm sure other people kind of did the same thing, was that, it's essentially a groove that helps the kneecap move, but it's surrounded by cartilage. So a trochlea injury is more so a cartilage issue. And it's now come out that, it was actually a loose piece of cartilage that had started to cause issues, and it was causing some flare-ups in his knee. And Jalen said earlier this week when we talked with him that the Cleveland game, he was working out before the Cleveland game on this past Tuesday, and he was having a great workout, and he kind of had a setback during that. They kind of took a couple days and decided to go get another MRI. I want to make it clear that I do not believe that the MRI that he had that revealed this injury was his first MRI in the process.
Gotcha.
But he went and had another MRI once he realized, and once the medical staff realized that there wasn't, this wasn't going away necessarily. And once they diagnosed that, they kind of evaluated the treatment plan for a little bit, and they decided on surgery. So it's not the most invasive procedure by any means. It's just arthroscopic. So they went in, whenever they do it, if they did it tonight, whenever they do it. I know it was supposed to happen at some point this week. All they were going to do was go in, remove the loose piece of cartilage, and his timeline is kind of up in air right now. He's out indefinitely. They've not ruled him out for the season. I think minimum you're probably looking at something like 4 to 6 weeks. Obviously that takes you right up to mid-April right now. So I personally, this is not reporting. This is just kind of my best guess. I wouldn't necessarily expect him back this regular season. And I know that's probably the sentiment that a lot of people probably share as well. But I think there's some value in not ruling him out indefinitely, having him kind of work back, rehab like he's going to anyways. And if this team, obviously the current trajectory it's on right now doesn't seem like it would necessarily secure a second round playoff series or, go any further than the first round. But if that were to become a possibility, maybe you're looking at Jalen being able to come back, because that's 2 months from now. And obviously there would be some return to competition rehab at that point. Sure. Mosley told us weeks ago, when they were still trying to figure out kind of what this was, that whenever he did come back, that he would be on a minutes restriction anyways. So, you can get into the conversation of whether it's worth it to push it or not with the way that this season has gone. And obviously something that they keep talking about a lot is his long-term health. He just signed that big contract last offseason that kicks in this next year. And he's a viable part of this team. He's, the third guy besides Powell and Franz. And I think it's become more and more evident the more games he hasn't played, how much they miss him on the floor.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
There was kind of this sentiment around the team that, everybody was kind of wondering what was going on with Suggs' injury, and that whether it was the coaches, some of the players, you'd talk to them and they'd be like, okay, we know Jalen's coming back. And then he has this surgery, and there's a little bit of clarity of, okay, he's out indefinitely. Maybe we don't need to worry about that anymore. But there's the other side of it where it's like, there isn't really any other help coming for this Magic team the rest of the way. This is the squad they've got to roll with. They're struggling right now. They're reeling. And I think a lot of what's interesting to watch over the next month or so of this season, the last 20 games, is just kind of how they respond, kind of how they deal with it. There's a lot of adversity right now, and there's a lot of potential for growth right now. But and I don't ever want to declare a season over before it is, obviously. But I think a lot of us have probably acknowledged that this is going to be a very monumental and very crucial offseason that the Magic have to get right. And, if they can find some good vibes these last 20 games going into it, that would be a big benefit. But the Jalen news is not a good start to that, as we've become aware of.
Let me just follow up real quick on a note you said kind of earlier.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. This is a separate injury from the initial quad contusion. And this is what I'm confused. And probably a lot of Magic fans are also confused. Was this issue in his knee that he just I can't remember, I can't say the name, I'm already spacing, it's late, but is the thing that he just had surgery on in his knee, the cartilage in his knee, was this something that had happened from the start of this quad knee issue, or was this a new injury that happened in ramp up on that Cleveland game day?
I would say going back to your point earlier that you made about kind of how he was listed at first, because that certainly was, not nothing, that he was questionable for a couple of games and he was doubtful for a couple of games, then they just started ruling him out. And when we were, first asking about it, the injury, the night that it happened, he was kind of just diagnosed with a sore left knee. They were like, we're going to, look at this and kind of get a better idea of this, try to go forward. But the categorization of it being a sore left knee, it's close to the quad, obviously, but a left quad contusion, that can be anywhere. So
sure,
I believe that these, I don't want to say that they're separate injuries. I would say that they're connected, because I believe that the quad contusion, that's probably what they had it ruled as for a while, and that maybe upon first evaluation that it didn't show loose cartilage or something along those lines. But again, like the trochlea, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's like in a weird spot on the knee, and it's not actually a bone on its own, or It's not a muscle. It's kind of something that helps a joint move it and keeps it in place a little bit. So we would see him go through some stuff at shoot around, but always on the side. And it was, for a long time, it was no contact. And, they let him continue to go through those kind of workouts. And a lot of it was just, we're just going to monitor it. We're just going to see how he goes day by day. And then I think, from what it sounds like, they probably got to a point where we're just going to rule him out, keep him listed as out until we feel that he's, more ready to maybe make a possible return. So I think that was probably when the questionable and doubtful probably stopped being listed as questionable and doubtful, and just be like, okay, we're going to take our time with this, list him as out, and keep him that way until we feel more confident about him being able to come back. Then it just never really got to that point, because as Jalen said in his ramp up process, he had something that kind of flared up. They went and got the next evaluation, and it revealed this loose cartilage injury. I wouldn't necessarily categorize them as separate injuries, but I would not be surprised. We don't have full clarity on this.
Sure.
But I would not be surprised if it is an injury that got more severe over time, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Like, the knee might have been a part of the issue from the start, but maybe it got worse during ramp up, and that's why they didn't see it or notice it at the start, because it was probably something, speculation here, this pure speculation, that okay, the issue is the quad. Maybe something in the knee is slightly off. They did imaging, didn't see anything. You're rehabbing the quad. During rehab and ramp up, it caused the issue in the knee to get severe enough and wear down enough to where oh, shoot, we have this issue. Let's go look into it a little bit more. There's something deeper than what we found. Because I think like a lot of us fans and people that cover it are like, well, why wasn't this discovered from the start, right? What happened? And that's why, okay, it was a setback or could have been a setback. It's not that it was missed. It's just that it wasn't an issue at the time and it became an issue as they were ramping up or something like that.
Yeah. And again, a lot of what I said is not clarified. It's not necessarily something that I would write with confidence. It's more of kind of maybe a gut feeling of how the injury recovery process went. Because obviously, like you mentioned earlier, we talked with Jamal one morning for, the first couple, we talked for about 8 minutes at that practice or shoot around, whatever it was. But the first couple minutes of it were just like 6 or 7 straight questions about Jalen and about how he was doing. So and the next day we came back and Jamal, before we started, was like, no updates today. And we were like, okay, like there's going to be, this is something that they're still trying to figure out. They're just letting him go day by day. And it was clear at that point, it wasn't something where it was, a day by day, maybe he can come back Friday, maybe he can come back Sunday. Like they probably had a target date in mind at that point. And then once the setbacks happen, kind of had to reassess that. So, but if you go back to, the night that the injury happened versus in that Detroit game, when it happened in the arena, I missed it because at the same time, Isaiah Stewart and Wendell were getting into it over by the Magic bench.
That's right.
And all of a sudden on the scoreboard in the arena, they're showing Jalen go back. And I think a lot of other people missed it because like there was a groan that took over the crowd. Like a lot of people, like there was an audible sigh, an audible like, oh man, like what is that? Because he was walking back to the locker room with Arnie. And none of us really saw it beforehand. So I actually went back the other day and found the TV broadcast of it, the broadcast angle of it. And it almost looks like he hyperextends it. He was like in a defensive stance. His leg kind of went out a little bit further. And then he tried to get back up and he like grabbed at it immediately. And he was like, something's up. So when he left that game, it was just an odd looking thing. So I think Jamal's used the word tricky a lot to describe, they used it with his back strain, they used it with hamstrings and stuff. And I get that as well. But this I would truly, truly categorize as something that was probably very tricky to figure out, because not only was it like not necessarily the most clear cut injury that happened at the time, but the fact that they were probably trying to deal with something and then realized later on that it was getting more severe or something else had happened in his ramp up process. That probably changed the course a little bit.
That makes sense. It's unfortunate because like this Magic team, they've gone through so much injury-wise this year, starting off with Paulo, then Franz, then Mo Wagner, Jalen, Gary Harris was super injured on and off to start the first half of the year. He's been healthy pretty much, for the last handful of weeks, or even month or so. Whether he's been helpful while healthy is a different conversation. This team has just dealt with a lot of injuries this year. And so it's a bummer to see not only that they've dealt with them, but that kind of someone, as we were talking earlier, that provides so much on-floor defensive energy, vocal communicator. I think he is one of the more vocal guys on and off the court with this team talking, and just kind of like one of the true dogs on the floor, right? That goes after it offensively and defensively. And this team is in a rut, which we'll start to transition to in a second. But, it seems like it's going to be a little bit harder for them to get out of this rut now that they also know that the guy that they were like, he's around the corner, he's going to help us, this is going to be great, is not around the corner. Like, he's probably not going to play this season. If he can get back to healthy with recovering from the procedure, the surgery, get his conditioning up right, and they're not forcing it, right? They're not rushing him. It's just an organic recovery, and he can get to 100%. I'm all about letting him play. I don't necessarily want them to like force him and like rush him to hit certain milestones. But if he just hits them naturally and he's feeling great and it doesn't feel like a rush process, go ahead, step on the court, young fella. Like, be on a minutes restriction, but get that playoff experience or play-in game experience, whatever the situation might look like later in the season. I don't expect it. I don't think it's going to happen. But, I'm not someone that's like, oh, shut him down for the season. Like, he's probably shut down for the season, but like let him do the organic steps of recovery while in season, and if he hits them, go for it.
The thing is too with Jaylen is like we all know Jaylen, like if he can be on the floor, he wants to be. Like
yeah.
I always laugh when people question like if a guy ever wants to be on the floor, because obviously this is their life, this is their game, this is what they do.
Sure.
But Jaylen is a guy you can actually never ever question of whether he wants to be on the floor or not. He played through so much before this injury happened. And so
He did.
It's killing him to not be out there. That's what he tells us that whenever we talk to him. He literally the other day was like, I miss playing basketball, and he misses being out there with the guys. So it's Jaylen. Like if he can play, he will play.
I
It's
feel
just
like
a matter
they've dialed that back a little bit though. Like he probably would have loved to have come back sooner on some of these things, and you have them saying, yeah, like let's wait another game or two. I feel like they've, I don't know. Let me ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
How much control does a player have returning to court versus the medical and coaching staff to telling them they're allowed to return to court? Because you often get fans saying, oh, this guy just doesn't want to play, that's why he's not playing. And I'm like, it's probably the medical staff telling him he just can't play. They probably want to be on the court, right? A guy like Jaylen, we know he's like played through some stuff, but that's probably because the medical staff has cleared him to play through some of that stuff. So like, really, who is the authoritative figure that allows a player to be on the court? Is it the player or is it the coach, or is it really just injury dependent on kind of who's got the final say?
Probably pretty injury dependent. We've asked that, and the answer we kind of get sometimes is, it's constant collaboration between and communication between the player, the coaching staff, the medical staff, those guys that are in there in the training room with him every day, and the guys that are putting him through his workouts and around him all the time. So I think it really is a group effort when it comes to the whole process. I would assume especially with a guy like Jaylen, it is more of a medical staff decision.
Sure.
In collaboration with, with somebody as important as Jaylen. And again, this is speculation. Maybe, so like, don't aggregate this or anybody.
I don't think I get aggregators listening to my podcast and show.
Anyways, but
if you are listening, thank you. I appreciate it, aggregators. But don't aggregate this.
I think it's something where, maybe with it could be something along the lines of somebody that's as important to the team as Jaylen. Like, does the front office get involved in that? We don't know anything along those lines, but I think you just kind of have to weigh all the options. And, there's a lot of important people that have a say in that decision, I would assume.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mix of a lot of things, but I do think Jaylen is a guy that would, give anything to be out on the court in any situation. So
sure. They got to save him from himself a little bit.
Yeah, I agree that if his recovery process goes off kind of without a hitch here after the surgery cleans some things up and kind of gets him back on the straight and narrow, then if it makes sense to get him back in there, then absolutely go for it. But I think that decision will probably ultimately come down more to the medical staff versus Jaylen. So
sure,
that would be my guess.
And let's be real. There's like 6 weeks left of the regular season anyways. It's probably not going to happen. I'm just being honest. Like, I just don't see it,
The timing of it makes it very tough as well.
Yeah, very, very tough. The Magic right now, they're sitting 8th place in the Eastern Conference standings. They are 29-33 on a 3-game losing streak, losing to the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Golden State Warriors, the team in my backyard that I just fried on. It's been a long day, guys. It's only Monday, but it's been a long day. Long week already. And then last night, the Toronto Raptors on Sunday. They play the Toronto Raptors again on Tuesday, the 4th, when a lot of you are going to be listening and watching to this. But something is off with this Magic team, Mason, and it's not just the Jalen Suggs injury. There is something else going on. The vibes are off. Team vibes and high fives are not high-fiving or vibing right now. And it was like that just a couple of months ago, where there was a lot more high fives and good vibes. But we're not seeing that right now. And we're seeing a lot of frustration. We're seeing a lot of vocalization off the court and in media sessions, which you have been a part of, and hearing different tones compared to just a month ago when a loss would happen, and you got Paulo or Franz up there, one of the other guys, and like, just a game. We're going to bounce back the next game. We're good. Got to trust the process. We're hearing guys get a little bit more vocal, like versus the Cleveland loss. You hear Paulo mention something about like, it's not the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, what is practice going to do right now? We got our asses kicked, right? Something along those lines. There's just a different tone and energy right now. And from my perspective, I get it. This team has been getting their asses handed to them for like 2.5 months now, since like kind of middle of December. They almost went 500 with wins in February, but they didn't. But like there was a couple of, like there was like a week or so there was like, maybe you got it, but then they didn't have it. It's just been it's just been off. It's been really weird the last couple of months. And I can kind of understand, like, again, they've lost a lot of games. They don't have a healthy roster. They haven't had a healthy roster all year. Every single one of their top 4 scorers, and Paulo, Franz, Wagner, and Jalen Suggs have all missed significant amount of time. Not even just a game here and there. We're talking significant amount of time from starting at game 5. Those 3 have played, those four have played 6 games together.
6 games, yeah.
Including Mo Wagner. And he's important. He's not one of the top 3 big dogs, but he was
that
the
4
best
has actually
scorer.
only played 5 because Mo was out for the Detroit game.
Oh, that's right. 5. You're 100% right on that. And he's, he was important to the second unit last year and this year. He was the best scorer off the bench and just a huge energy guy. We can talk about if his defense was effective at all, but offensively, he was a juggernaut, and he was a energizer on defense, and he's clearly being missed. But man, what has shifted? Why has the tone gone from optimistic and hopeful to we are lost?
I think a lot of what we've seen over the last particularly month or so, where it's really where I know we've kind of talked about the results since really Christmas haven't been what they were in the first third of the season. And if you remember, the first game after Christmas was that Miami blown lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And then I believe it was Boston right after that, which they won. So, there was some kind of up and down results a little bit, but then they went on the road and they went out west right before the deadline. And it started with that game in Miami where there was another blown lead, and they go to double overtime and they run out of gas. And I really think since there, that's probably like the catalyst of where frustrations began, because they were really, they should have won that game.
Yeah.
They were up 12 with 6 minutes to go, up 6 in the first overtime, I think. I don't have it right in front of me, and it's been a while since that game, but I think it was something along those lines where they had multiple opportunities to win it, and they didn't take any of them, and they ended up paying the price for it. Then they went out on the road, and I think the only game they won on that road trip was the Sacramento one, which
correct.
And that's one of those games where, okay, we're just not going to miss a shot tonight. Like even the worst shooting teams in the league have those nights where it's just like, okay, like we're scoring 130 points tonight, see if you can keep up with us. And Sacramento that night could not. So I think what we've seen the last really month or so is a team kind of starting to realize that the injuries caught up to them, that the expectations that they walked into this year for were not going to be achieved. And as we were talking about off camera before we started, some of that is their own doing. There are conversations to be had this offseason about probably roster construction and how you surround your best players. There are conversations about how you can best utilize them offensively. The defense, I think, has still been fine. Even without Jaylen, it's still been near top third, which, if you've got your 2 guys on offense and a top third of the NBA defense, like you should probably be a little bit closer to 500 in the last, month and a half or so. And I don't have the direct record in front of me in that time, but I know it's not that. I think there's just been a bit of a realization period of like, this year hasn't gone to plan, and you're seeing a young team that's got a lot of young guys kind of weathering this in this capacity for the first time. Because in previous seasons, when Powell and Franz and those kind of teams were led by them, went through struggles, it was, okay, we're a rebuilding team. We're still growing. We're still developing. We've not reached a point yet where this can be where this can feel like a low bar because we don't know what the high bar is yet. Then they go win 47 games last year, and they push a Cavs team to 7 games in the playoffs, and they come into this year with expectations, and rightfully so. Like they bring back most of the same guys. Theoretically, everybody would be better another year older. You've got a 21-year-old Paolo starting the year, 22-year-old Franz, or 23-year-old Franz. Jalen's 23. Like your 3 best players are in their 3rd and 4th years, and they're still, as long as injuries haven't derailed anything, and we'll see with Jalen. But I think with Paolo and Franz, the flashes are still there too. That they're coming back from injury, but they're still clearly not near their apex yet as to who they're going to be as players down the line. And obviously, reporter stuff aside, like you always hope that a player is able to recover from their injuries and everything. Jalen was obviously, he emerged, when he had a full season last year, clearly emerged as a 3rd option, viable enough to play alongside those guys. And obviously that's just offensively talking, not knowing or not talking about what he does defensively and everything and what he does from an injury standpoint. And same thing with Mo, just on the offensive side, the value he provides off the bench and his energy. So to get back to the point that I'm kind of making in a long-winded way is that the weight of expectations, I think, have started to come down on this Magic team a little bit. And whether it was by their own doing or not, realizing that those expectations are not going to be met and the reality has been altered so much this year, I think it's taken a toll on them. And I don't know if you can necessarily blame them for that because, like I said, like this hasn't happened in this sort of capacity. And these are young guys still trying to find their way and figure out a way to carve their spot at the top of the East, which is where they want to be. And, they were a game off from being in a home court advantage spot last year. And, I know it was 5 games, 6 games that they've got that had the top 3 guys, but they're 4-2 in those games, like small sample size theater. But if you're winning 67% of your games, like you're going to be in good shape. And obviously Paolo was on torrid pace to begin the year before his injury, and Franz really stepped up. Franz became an all-star this year before his injury. Jalen was performing pretty well, I would say, in the second role. It was a little bit rough when both Jalen and Franz were out, or when both Paolo and Franz were out.
Yeah.
But when he was the number 1 option, like he still had his moments. He was still able to will the Magic to a few games. But the way everything kind of just transpired this year, I think it's kind of realizing that we're 20 games away from the regular season coming to a close. They are 2 losses away from matching last year's loss total, and the situation to get into the postseason, the situation to follow up on those expectations that they had at the beginning of the year and that they talked so much about, it's just not really a pathway right now. And I think there's probably a lot of that going on right now. So they're figuring it out, and I think the frustration is justified in a lot of different areas. Some of it can be toned back, obviously, but I think they're right to be frustrated. And Jamal was talking about it yesterday in the post-game presser, yesterday being Sunday, and Brett actually asked a question about kind of the morale of the team. Does Jamal sense that his guys are down? And he's like, no, I sense that they're frustrated. And we talked to Wendell in the locker room, and he was like, we're desperate for a win right now, and our mistakes feel magnified, and there's a lot that's we're still trying to figure out and get going on the fly. But as they say a lot of the time too, that the league isn't going to wait for them to figure it out. They don't care.
Right.
They're going to pounce on them. Any good opponent would. And you saw even an 18-win Toronto team before last night. Like Orlando was clearly flat in the first quarter Sunday night, and Toronto pounced on it. They did well to come back. There's the one stretch, which just seems to be a recurring issue right now with this Magic team, and it seems to keep happening in the third quarter, where there's just like a lapse for a few minutes, and it ends up deciding the game. It was 27-6 over 4.5 minutes between the third and fourth quarter in favor of Toronto, and that forced the Magic to have to push all their chips in on that last push.
Coach, call a timeout during those stretches, please, for the love of God, Mosley. Tune into this podcast and hear me say that, please. Sorry, just had to go off that. We all beg him to do it, and he doesn't do it. Like, just,
you're all good.
You see it. You see it.
There were the 2 timeouts at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and when it got out to like 12 points and then 16 points, and they were like really close right after one another.
Yeah.
It's like maybe one of those would have been a little bit better utilized in the third quarter when the run was going on.
Yeah.
But Credit where it's due. Like the Magic pushed back, like they knew the response and they did, and Franz makes that layup 999,000 times out of a million. So
Yeah,
I think maybe it was something where the kind of looks that we're getting all night, like he was shocked to be that uncontested at the rim.
sure.
But again, like you count on him to make that 99% of the time. And, Franz is somebody that we know that can kind of take those moments hard. So you just hope that he has the response, I think, to be able to shake that off and come back. But the Magic as a whole kind of, as of late, that's kind of been a theme, is like, how are you going to respond to the Cavs loss, the Warriors loss, the Jalen news, all that kind of stuff.
Because I actually think, like, after the Cavs loss, I actually think they responded pretty well in the Golden State game.
They did.
Like, they actually played a really good game that game. It was just like
Steph Curry.
God mode. He went into God mode. And yeah, maybe they could have done a few things differently defensively to like help him not like maybe goes 8 out of, hits 8 3-pointers and not 12, but he was in God mode at that point. He's not
right.
There's not a whole lot that can be done. And they still kept it like pretty close. Had it was just like a average Steph Curry night and not a 56-point game, Steph Curry, the Magic would have won. But it sucks that they played that good of a game. Just Steph did Steph things, and then it kind of takes the wind out of the sail after all the good things that they did that game, because the first half was one of the most exciting halves of basketball I've seen the Magic play in ages. The fourth quarter was great. The third quarter, Steph. That's just what you label it.
That's just how slim the margin is for them right now.
Yeah, very slim.
That's where the injuries come back in, is like having Jaylen, having Mo back. Like, yes, there's certain things they could be doing, but you can clearly see it in moments like that, like they're reeling and they need somebody that can, totally alter the tone of a game a little bit. And they don't have that anymore. Like we said earlier, like the help isn't coming this year, most likely.
No.
So,
in some ways, they have tried to do some things to make it get some different help. Mm-hmm. And I had this transition so lined up in my head as we were going into it, and I'm just bombing it right now.
Are we going to talk about Jett and Gary?
We're going to talk about Jett and Gary. We're going to talk about Jett and Gary. This Magic team, we've been talking for 37 minutes. Unfortunately, it's been mostly like kind of downer stuff, but I actually think this is pretty exciting what we're about to step into. Jett Howard, the Magic sophomore, he played 18 games last year. This year, he has played 15 games. Last season, he averaged 3.7 minutes per game because he was a garbage time player. This year, he's averaging 11.6. He's had a very interesting season for the Magic, right? During all those injuries, in November and stuff like that, when it wasn't just the core guys, but it was like everyone, there were times where Jett was getting playing time, but it was like, it wasn't a consistent role within his playing time. I was begging, let him be the seventh man off the bench, getting 18 minutes a game for 10 games straight. And that just wasn't the case. He'd play one game, not the other. If he was playing, it was in like a different role. Sometimes it was like the seventh man. Sometimes he was like the 11th man. It was just like kind of all over the place with how he was being utilized. But he's definitely gotten more experience this year than he has last year in meaningful minutes. There's been times, particularly with Gary Harris' injury, being up and down in his availability. And also when he does play, he's not much of a offensive player. He might get a couple shots up. If he hits 8 points in a game, that's a really good game for him, because most of the time he's getting like 5. But coach recently, and sorry, before I go that, Magic fans have been saying, put Jett in. He's one of the guys that's quick, fast, and will let it fly. He'll be in for 5 minutes and get up 5 3-pointers. If you let him, he will shoot the ball. Let's see what they have in this 7th pick, 12th pick, whatever pick he was picked at, right? But he hasn't really had that consistency. He's getting it right now. 2 games in a row. He has been the 6th or 7th man off the bench over Gary Harris. Gary Harris has gotten 2 DMPs right now because of Jett Howard. What has gone into make that happen? What have you seen out of Jett that you think is exciting?
Jett, to me, this year has really grown as a defender. That's always going to be his ticket to more playing time, I think. Yeah. He's a shooter. We know him to be a shooter, and he can play make a little bit too. I remember we were talking about it. We were talking with him earlier in the locker room this year. He was like, "I'm gonna watch my college film. Like I can play make a little bit."
He's got some passing for sure. I've seen a few.
He is. There have been the flashes of passing this year, but when he's on the floor, like his primary role is, okay, when the ball is swung to you, like you need to be confident enough to let it fly. And I think on a Magic team that is clearly shot for confidence, or Jeff Weltman, when he did his radio interview with Mike Bianchi at the trade deadline, he was talking about, when they were talking about wanting to get a shooter or wanting to improve the shooting, he's like, clearly we are shot for confidence a little bit right now on 3-pointers. Jett is a guy that is always going to let it fly, and sometimes to a fault. But right now, I think the Magic need a little bit of that. But the key for him, like I said earlier, like the playing time is always going to be dependent on his defense. Like, can you put him in there and trust him to not get silly fouls or not get instantly beat by his matchup, because teams are going to hunt him when he's on the floor, especially when he's on the floor with other first unit guys. And he's a guy that is just going to need those kind of reps to grow. So I remember, I think it was before the Memphis game, when you were talking and asking that question, I pulled up the quote because I asked Jamal, I was like, how do you manage him being a second-year guy, needing to get on-court reps to develop? And really, when we say second-year guy, he's been through 2 NBA seasons, but games-wise, like, he's a rookie.
Yeah, for sure.
He's a rookie. He played, I don't know the exact number, but I know he spent more games in the G League last year than in the NBA. So, and like we said, or like you mentioned earlier too, like he averaged 3.5 minutes a game last year.
Yeah, it was all garbage time in 18.
His playing time was very sporadic, and garbage time is garbage time. When a guy's out there, you're going to get your shots up. But he's been relied upon, and I think he has been the first guy off the bench the last 2 games. So I think part of that is searching for some offense, searching for a spark. And I know Gary's struggles this year have been well documented, but he is struggling mightily this year offensively. And Jett is a guy that, you kind of got to still figure out and see what you got with him. And I think I don't want to say that when I use the term experimentation, that makes it sound like they're like, oh, this season's lost, like, let's just see what we got. But I think there is a bit of, okay, we need to see what we've got in a guy. Can we rely upon him in late game situations? Can we rely upon him for 12 to 14 minutes a game instead of just 6 to 8? And you saw, on the possession where Franz got his layup attempt at the end of the game, they subbed him in because he's a shooter, and they didn't have a big on the floor on that final possession of that game. It was Corey who was the inbounds passer. And then you had your 2 guys out there in Kenny and Jett. And when you look at, the bench scoring or the shooting options outside of Powell and Franz, if you're going to have non-shooters out there, you want Powell and Franz to be out there. And they're not necessarily non-shooters. That's just not the first thing that their offense is predicated on. But you want your other guys out on the floor in that moment where you're not worried about a rebound. You're not worried about anything. You have 4 seconds. You need to get a shot up. You want your best shooters out there. Kenny, I know, has struggled this year. He's a 36% guy. And you want Jett out there because he has a clip that is capable of lighting it up. So I think with Jett, going back to the defense point, that's been the most substantial part of his growth this year. That's really keyed him getting to playing time on the floor.
Yeah, he doesn't look lost anymore.
No,
he's I wouldn't say he's good. I wouldn't say he's even positive yet, but he's not lost anymore. That's kind of my observation of his defense so far.
There were steps this year where he was taking where he is absolutely at the point now where it's not a negative that he's on the floor.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily need him to be this plus defender if he has the shooting clip that he does. You just, like you said, it can't hurt you to have him out there. And there were times earlier this year where he would get caught in those situations, and there would be fouls made, or there would be, teams would hunt him, and it would get him, stuck a little bit.
For sure.
But that happens a lot less now. And to his credit, I know whenever we talk about it with him, he actually jokes with it. He's like, you think I can't play defense, huh? And we're like, no, Jett, that's not what we're saying. We're asking about your development. And he's really taken a lot of steps forward in that this year. And I think that this playing time is as much seeing what they have in him as rewarding that development a little bit as well.
I'm hoping that it lasts. I don't want this to be done in 2 more games. I would love to see Jett play the rest of the season. in this capacity. I imagine, don't imagine, this would be kind of like not surprising that if for some reason they make the play in, or when they make the play in, that, maybe they give that spot back to Gary. But personally, I hope not. Like, no disrespect to Gary. I've actually been a pretty big Gary supporter. Like I'm not one that like hates on him. He's just been not very effective this year, like offensively for sure. And even defensively, he's just been a guy like that's fine. But let's see if Jett can be a spark plug and get, go 3 of 5 in 12 minutes from 3. He's like one of the few guys that I watch like who actually will move off the ball quickly. Like I saw him, maybe it was during the Golden State game. I think it was, maybe I don't remember the defender who it was, but he was on the wing. He was on the inside towards the baseline, and there was a defender there. He quickly goes to the other side and then like kind of sprinted back and then caught it. Like he was going back and forth behind the screener behind the defender with someone else, just trying to get a good look. And then he got the ball and fired up a shot. I don't think it went in, but it was just like, man, so many times our 3-point shooters are just standing and maybe shifting, but not really moving off ball. And he's one of the few that will move a bit off ball, which is really cool to see. Something I wish we could get more of. We just don't have the personnel where that feels organic for them, and maybe even the coaching system for that to be more encouraged, but he does it a bit. He's also quick. He's like, Kenny can sprint to the corners pretty well, but Jett is, I said this the other night, fire up the Jett engines, like he's quick and he gets the ball off. He's got such a quick release. He is not afraid to let it fly. And I'm just like, I've been so encouraged, and it hasn't been like amazing results yet, but then like, I looked at the box score last night, and I don't have it up in front of me, so this might be a little bit off, but like, he and Grady Dick, who was drafted like a couple picks after him, they both got off the same amount of shot attempts. I think it was 5. Grady had 5 points and Jett had 9. They both went 1 of 3 from 4. And Jett did it in like 12 minutes and Grady did it in like 20 minutes or something like that. Something like that, people. It's not like that might be off by a little bit here and there.
Grady did leave the game with an injury too. We should make that. We should make that clear.
Yes, that's fair. That's fair. And I hope you recover well. This isn't like to hate on Grady, but it's just cool to see him like have more points than a guy who played more than double the amount of minutes, got up the same shot attempts and had better efficiency, and just doing some things. Like that's a positive for me. He was okay in the Golden State game. He wasn't like awful in it, but I'm just hoping that if he can stay in this like 6th, 7th man off the bench every game for the next stretch of games, hopefully that will bring some consistency in what he's able to do on the floor and feel more confident in what he's supposed to do on the floor too. That would be super fun. I would really enjoy that.
Yeah, I think there will still be some tinkering with the rotations over the last 20 games or so. One thing I've actually noticed, I want to pull it up because I don't want to get the numbers wrong, but
unlike me, who's just guessing at numbers right now,
minutes have kind of fallen off a little bit.
They've gotten a little lower. And kind of felt like he was starting to hit a rookie wall a little bit.
Right. And again, some of these guys, Tristan we talked off camera about, hitting a wall in your first season of doing an 82 game thing, right? Your first time going through an 82 game gauntlet. He's played in 58 games this year. And I'm looking to see here when it was his minutes started to kind of tally off. And obviously, like, once Paolo and Franz came back, like, his minutes were obviously going to decrease. He wasn't going to be the spot starter anymore. And it was good for him that, he was a guy that started the year in the 3rd unit, only had played in that Miami game in garbage time when it was completely decided in the season opener before Paolo and Franz got hurt. Or before Powell got hurt. He had the 17 points in Cleveland, and then he was the starter essentially the rest of the way through the Powell and Franz stuff. Like, if one of those two was out of the lineup, he was the guy that was going in their spot. And he had some up and down moments where he had a couple scoreless games in a row. He had, some nice games where he would score like 20 points, 15 points, something along those lines. And then he'd follow it up with like 2 or 4. And again, like, he's a rookie. Even though he's 23 and he's had the collegiate experience on his background.
Still his first time playing 82.
Still an NBA rookie. Still his first time playing 82
He's never
games.
traveled
like you just
this
said.
much in his life.
Right. And he has now the last game he started was the 46th game of his year. It was the game at Utah, which I can't remember why he started that game. But it was the game at Utah on that 5-game road trip. And since then, he played 25 minutes in that game, and he's gone over the next 12. He's gone 10 minutes, 18, 18, 17, 15, 8, 18, 7, 6, 21. But then the last 2 games, he's gone 2.5 minutes, 5.5 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Coach is tinkering.
There's some tinkering going on. And obviously, if you're going to give Jett some minutes, obviously Jett is in the Gary spot as first off the bench right now. But if you want to give Jett 20 minutes, well, you're probably going to have to take minutes away from somebody else.
Yeah.
And Tristan is probably seeing some of his minutes taken away right now as he kind of just develops and develops through his first rookie year.
He's going to be a good player. I don't think anyone's really worried about Tristan long term. This is just you've hit a wall. We need to try a few new things. You haven't done necessarily anything wrong, but we need to try something else. This
has been a really solid season for Tristan. And I try my best to keep tabs on the other rookies. I would be surprised if he's not on All NBA second team.
I hope he would.
All rookie
second team.
Obviously not All NBA, sorry, Tristan, but All NBA second team.
Maybe one day.
But that is not this year. But I would be surprised if he's not, honored as one of the 10 best rookies this year. He was a rising star. He was playing really well. He obviously fulfilled a much needed role for so much of this year. I think you can probably already categorize his season as a success.
Yes,
honestly.
Absolutely. And he'll get plenty of playing time down the stretch. It's not like he's going to play 2 to 4 minutes the rest of the way.
Right. This isn't a forever thing, I would imagine, throughout the rest of this year. There's just some tinkering, catch your wind a little bit here. We're going to try a few other things. I don't anticipate that Gary is completely out of the rotation for the rest of the year either.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll get some minutes back as well.
Totally.
But I do think that this all is arching back to Jett getting more of an opportunity right now, that his development has earned him, that his shooting ability earns him, because obviously the Magic need some of that right now. They need his energy. They need his pace. They need his threat of a shooting. They need a shooting threat. And as long as he is playing the defense that he has been as of the last month or so, it doesn't hurt to have him out on the floor. So I think that's another thing to monitor really with some intent over this last 20 game stretch is how can Jett maybe play himself into a larger role where we consider him in a different light going into next year.
Sure.
Is there a moment where if you look up and down the roster right now, outside of guys that are inactive, not healthy, outside of Paolo and Franz, who are you probably most likely to, if you had to tab somebody to catch fire?
Probably
Jett's probably not far down that list.
Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a night where he goes 5 of 8 from 3, right? At some point, because he's just that quick.
And it can happen like that with a shooter of his capability, with
There's 2 threes back to back in the Golden State game, and that's literally when I said fire the Jett engines,
Right. When he's got a quick trigger like that, he's not afraid to shoot it. I think there's just a lot of benefit to having him on the floor right now. So
totally.
I think that's a certain positive to watch for right now.
You can steal my fire the Jett engines. Just remember, if people start poking around at it, if David and
I saw you
Jeff
tweeted the other night.
I
saw you tweeted the other night. So CC Stephen Cameron.
Yeah, just it doesn't have to be every time you use it. Just say every now and then, in an article, fire the Jett and CC Stephen. Mason, we said we were gonna talk for 30 minutes. It's been 55. And that's only on the recorded side.
I can keep going.
I can't though. I'm tired.
Okay.
I got a 3-year-old, and the next couple of topics we would talk about, we can save for another time.
Okay.
But I do want to ask one more thing before we fully wrap it up. Another positive. Give me your 2-minute thoughts on Wendell Carter Jr. Because to me, recently he's been really, really good. This isn't something that we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about the bonus questions of a player's mom getting active on social media, but I think we can just not, and that's okay. But I do want to talk about Wendell Carter because I want to end this on another positive too, because I think a lot of people had very down thoughts on him this year, right? Because his play was not great. He was constantly, he went through his own injury run for a while there and with the plantar fasciitis in the beginning of the season. And that was like, oh, great, not again. He's come back. He had a mixed role, sometimes playing next to Goga in the starting lineup when they were dealing with all those really bad injuries. Then he was playing off the bench for a while. And it's been a couple of weeks now. Mosley made the decision to pull Goga from the starting lineup and play Wendell Carter Jr. And I think that was a really good call. He might have should have done it a little bit sooner because Goga's play has not been amazing recently, ever since his injury with a concussion. But Wendell Carter's been great, in my opinion. Not like amazing, but just solid. Getting good rebounds, scoring much better. His shot is still off, but he's doing just about everything else right. What's getting you excited about Wendell Carter Jr. right now?
I am completely in the same boat as you. I think when he came back from the All-Star break, he just looked fresh. He just looked rejuvenated. And he got inserted right back into the starting lineup, and he's made the decision look like the correct one, as you were talking about. Like his scoring isn't what it was years ago. He's not 15 and 10. He's not 15 and 8. But for a team that has been so bitten by the injury bug, and Wendell obviously in his career has been so bitten by the injury bug, you just can't put enough value on a guy that's just been available. Like he's played every game since November 27th when he came back versus Chicago, and that is like he's missed. Let's see here, he's played. Quick math. 49 games out of 62. Like that's a much higher percentage than most of his other seasons. Like,
yeah.
And again, like, has the play been stellar throughout all of it? No, he's had lulls, but he's had really good moments. And I think right now this is one of those really good moments where the Magic have needed production outside of Paolo and Franz. They're getting it. He's rebounding the ball really well as well. And he's just been available. And like you said, like the shot is just the shot this year. The outside shot, that is, but he's been much better about scoring around the rim. He's bouncier. It looks like he's crashing the glass. It seems like he's really doing enough. He's doing a lot. I mean, again, assists aren't the only indicator for playmaking, but he's got 9 assists his last 2 games. Like, there's just a lot that he's doing that's helping.
He's a smart basketball player.
He's a veteran, and we talk. I'm going to credit Phil on this because obviously he's been around this team much longer than I have, but he's a guy that in this locker room, that's still very young, still has a lot of guys figuring out their role in the league and who they are. Like, he's a guy that Phil always says, like, when he talks, people listen. He's seen a lot. This is year 7 for him. This is year 7 for him. He's 25 years old. He's not the most tenured guy in the league by any means, but in this locker room, he is. He's one of the longer tenured guys, and there's just a lot of value that his perspective brings, and he's backing that up as well by playing really well on the floor. Some people may, again, I see the same stuff that you probably do on Twitter and on social media about some of the dialogue that surrounds some of these guys, and there's some frustration that goes around, and people are very reactionary, and fans are that way. I'll never tell somebody how to be a fan. That's not my job. But I think there should be some realization of how impactful he's been for them.
He's been solid
the past really month or so, and just the fact that he's been able to be available, even if he hasn't been playing up to what he's capable of this year. Just having him available when so many other guys haven't been has been important as well. So he's not going to play all 82. That was his goal going into this year. He wanted to play all 82, but he's going to get close if
he stays healthy.
Happening. But if he stays healthy, like, he's going to get close, and he's just been very, very, very solid for them.
If, like, Okay, so he's an imperfect player. He's a little bit smaller for a center. He's got good wingspan for a center, so he can still like get up there physically in some ways. But he's also not a very explosive big man either. But he's a smart defender. He's fairly good at defense. He's got really great numbers in the paint too, and can even handle switches on the perimeter pretty well. And like really, if he was just able to hit that outside shot a little bit better, let's like he's currently shooting the three this season
21%.
21%. If he was shooting 33% from three, we would be singing. It would be a lot easier for a lot of. I don't think we would. If he was shooting 33% from three, I think a lot of fans' tunes about him would be a lot different this season than what we are currently seeing.
I think if he was shooting 33% from three, he might be. Oh no, Cole's shooting 34% from three.
Yeah, he one of the better shooters on the team.
33% from three would be the third qualified highest behind Cole and Tristan. Corey
even if he was shooting 32%, because I don't want, let's have some limitations here, right? But yeah, like just like some like okay-ish from three and not just like god awful career worse from three. Like he would be viewed at a totally different light and would actually be like a really great fit for Paulo and Franz having a stretch five out there. It's just unfortunate that so many guys are in a weird shooting slump this season, and that's a conversation for another day, because I could go an hour just on this team shooting issues, and even though you said you don't have a time restriction, you do when it comes to us bringing up that topic in a deep form conversation. You and I would talk about that forever. But yeah, I've been just really impressed. I want to circle back. I've been really impressed with Wendell Carter recently. He hasn't been amazing, but he's just been solid. And I think that's gone under noticed a bit. And I just wanted to like kind of end this podcast giving him a bit of a shout out, a little bit of a spotlight, because I don't think enough people are noticing it. And I also think sometimes people want him to be a center that he's just not going to be. But overall, I think he's been like pretty solid and one of the few bright spots during this like downward, not so fun stretch of basketball for the last like month and a half.
Yeah, no disagreement. I think he's fulfilled a role for them, and he's been a bonus.
Yeah,
when they need one right now,
which is great. They gave him a big extension this past offseason. I want to see him like continue to grow into himself and show that he was worth that early extension, in my opinion. But yeah,
right. I mean, when we talked to him before the All-Star break, he was like, these last 26 games are going to be probably the most important 26 games of my career. And
yeah,
you can dissect the connotation that could be behind that, knowing that I don't think these guys are necessarily immune to feeling some of the pressure that this team is under right now to get to where they want to go, and the kind of timeline that they have to be on to get that. So I don't think these guys are, we talk about Wendell being a smart basketball player. Like,
he's smart.
I don't think he's a dumb guy in general. Like,
he knew he wasn't going to get traded this year because he couldn't get traded this year. So he wasn't sweating anything, but he also knows, like off that quote, like if I want to stick around this team, or if I'm going to get traded, go to a team that wants me, I need to play really good basketball. And, whether it's with the Magic or somewhere else, the better you play, the probably better position you're going to be in as a player. Because bad players don't go to good teams most often. Good teams don't call on bad players. So, right. Yeah. And he's got a long contract now, Mason. He does. Mason, I really appreciate you taking the time. Again, we joked about talking. Well, we didn't joke. We said, yeah, we're starting a little later than we thought. Maybe we'll talk for like 30, 40 minutes. It's kind of like not a whole lot of exciting things to talk about right now with the Magic. We found a way. We talked about some of the bummer stuff. We're ending on a high, talking about Jett Howard and his development and his new role in the offense, talking about Wendell Carter being, looking like a good Wendell Carter Jr. again. And, the Magic have another opportunity to win a game on Tuesday, March 4th, when a lot of you are listening to this, in Kia Center versus the Toronto Raptors. And I hope, for your sake, for my sake, for the Magic's sakes and the fandom's sakes, the Magic win this game. And I expect them. I do. They should bounce back fine. Mason, thanks again for coming on the show. Go ahead and let all the listeners know where they can find you and your work. I said at the top, but I want to hear you say it.
All good, man. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity always to come on it. And whenever we chat basketball, whenever we chat Magic, it's always a good time. Always appreciate it. And like I said, like, yes, we went long. we always go long. So
we
should stop putting a ballpark on it, because we're just gonna hit it over the fence anyways.
I'll talk to you in a few weeks, and we just won't even bring it up a time. We'll just you got a few hours.
Yeah, we'll just be like, hey, you free? All right, let's talk. But I'm on Twitter. I'm on BlueSky. At mvsonwilliams. That's where all my coverage is. More of my live stuff is on Twitter. You can find all my links on BlueSky. And then you can read us. Read me. Let me get the URL correct so I don't steer anybody wrong. si.com/NBA/Magic. We're on Facebook as well. Magic on SI. That's everything gets posted there. You won't miss a story if you've got that bookmarked. I tweet most of my stuff, besides like the nuanced injury reports, all that kind of stuff. Like, it gets out every single game. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Always appreciate the time, man. I do want to clarify the beginning with the Jalen stuff. Like, a lot of that was just like pure chatter. Just, there's a lot of clarity that is lacking in this situation, and that is, as much as people probably don't want to hear it, we're probably not going to get much closure on that, especially with this being an indefinite thing, not a season-ending thing as of right now. So a lot of that is just kind of chatter and maybe some of my personal thought on that. But everything else, whether it was good, bad, the topics that we talked about, I had a ton of fun. I always do. So I appreciate it.
If aggregators are listening and trying to aggregate our conversation from the start, just don't. It was clear we were just talking about what we knew
of guys talking
and
ball.
Putting some puzzle pieces together and giving some opinions. Okay, we're just here to talk some basketball.
Enjoy basketball.
Enjoy.
This is one of my favorite brands.
I'm gonna need to get one of those. That's great.
Yeah, shout out the numbers on the board, guys. Kenny, the king of the fourth quarter. I've been watching him on YouTube forever. I'm sure some of the listeners probably are aware of him, but they have a podcast that's on ESPN as well. Numbers on the board. They're fantastic. They're fans, but they do a lot of good stuff for the game. They talk about, when there's so much negative stuff that gets talked about with basketball discourse. If you guys want good, fun stuff, that they're somebody I'll always recommend. So had to represent them. We should all enjoy basketball more. We should all enjoy basketball more and appreciate this great game that we get to watch and talk about for 10 months of the year. It's a lot of fun.
We're gonna enjoy it when the Magic get a W, and we'll enjoy moments of it even if they don't. Magic fans, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Close Up on Orlando Magic HQ. Reminder to tap into our coverage as well. After you're done checking out Mason, go ahead and wrap on over to our stuff. We got written coverage as well after home games, and we do post-game live spaces on Twitter and X. And of course, you got our weekly shows on YouTube and podcast form, however you want to digest it. Mason, thanks again. Let's go Magic. Peace. Dude, that was awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.